All right, Patriots fans / bandwagon jumpers. The team is phenomenal. It's not a secret. 33-0. You heard it here. It was a laugher from the get-go. I guess if you're a Jets fan, you can at least look at it and say they only lost by 9 points in the second half. As for the Patriots, who have made these weeks effortless, yes, they play in a horrible division, with the exception of the Bills, who actually are the only team that almost beat them, but they did not. They are now 7-0. The Patriots are the league's top scoring team, and they are the league's lowest scoring team against. So they have the best offense and the best defense in points allowed.
All right. Tom Brady has a defense carrying him again.
If just their point differential, right? Just their point differential was their total points allowed on the year. To get an idea, their point differential alone would be the 10th best offense in the league. Just the differential. The San Francisco 49ers, also undefeated, the only other undefeated team in the league, have the next best point differential at 92. Plus 92. To get an idea of how just dominant this is, Minnesota Vikings are third with plus 69. The Niners are significantly ahead of that, obviously, 23 ahead of that with plus 92. And ahead of that, New England plus 175. That's 83 more. The difference between the number one Patriots and the 49ers differential, the difference between number one and number two would be the third biggest in the league. They are more than double Minnesota's. So barring some sort of injury, take solace in this, Broncos country. Your team wasn't going to the playoffs anyway. They really weren't. Didn't really matter how it was going to turn out. They weren't going to go to the playoffs. And they weren't going to make much noise, even if all sorts of miracles happened, and they did. But it doesn't matter anyway. Because unless Tom Brady gets hurt, the New England Patriots are going to the Super Bowl, okay? Number one defense, number one offense. I think we saw, as good as the Chiefs are, that they have some flaws. They lost 2 in a row before Denver did a very, very polite job of getting them back on the right track. So that was a very thoughtful host. The Broncos were. They took care of their guests. They made them feel right at home and made them feel better. But the Patriots are simply dominant yet again. This first 7 games are as dominant as they've ever been, which is more than a little bit scary. But Broncos fans, as you're waiting for the wreckage of another season in a row, the third straight, to kind of eventually all the pieces land. The Broncos are Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner cartoons. They already took the rocket roller skates and went off the side of the Grand Canyon. Right now, they're just holding the sign up that says help, and then in a few weeks, the puff of smoke will finally hit. But they weren't doing anything anyway. The Patriots' average result is 32-7. Average. The only team that's even come close to giving them a run, like I said, was the Bills. They beat the Steelers 33-3, the Dolphins 43-0, the Jets 30-14 the first time around, Bills 16-10, then they beat Washington 33-7, Giants 35-14, and then tonight against the Jets 33-0. Oh, and next week they get the Browns. So, yeah. At home, mind you. Broncos weren't going to make that kind of dent. Just wasn't going to happen. So, Monday Night Football, in effect, this week in the books. Week 7 goes by the wayside. We will talk about Week 8 going forward and what the Broncos are and what they will become. Expect some of that to change in relatively short order. Want to take a peek over at the Avalanche tonight. The Avalanche suffered their first loss of the season in regulation. 7-1-1, 15 points on the year. They fell 3-1 tonight to the St. Louis Blues on the road. They've still had a terrific road trip. The concern, of course, is Mikko Rantanen, who had to leave the game and only was able to play 8 minutes on the ice. No word necessarily on Rantanen's situation yet, but that's why we will talk to our Avs insider, Adrian Dater, who will join us, well, next. The Avalanche fall 3-1 to the Blues tonight. Their first loss of the season. The loss itself, not a big deal. They're 7-1-1. The concern is Mikko Rantanen, and our Avalanche insider Adrian Dater joins us courtesy of Bud Light. And Adrian, looking at this game, not a huge deal regarding the loss. Like I said, they're 7-1-1. It's a great start. But the loss of Rantanen to injury, is there anything to be concerned about going forward that you're aware of?
Yeah, I think there is, Sean. From what I've been told, it's going to be an MRI back on Tuesday in Denver. Avs couldn't rule anything out after the game tonight. Sometimes they know quickly whether it's just a sprain or a twisted ankle or a ligament or something. But we're not going to know until the Avs get back to Denver, early morning tonight. Rantanen's going to be tested further on Tuesday. And as I've been told over the years in hockey, the MRI will tell the truth. Until then, we really don't know. But it's serious enough to the point where, we don't know entering the next day. And it didn't look good. That said, you never know. You never know what it's going to be. It could be a week or 2 weeks, could be less, or it could be a torn ACL and out 6 months. We just don't know yet.
Well, let's knock on wood. It's not the latter. Like we've seen before, I just saw it at the Bronco game last week. It looked like Patrick Mahomes maybe suffered a very serious knee injury, and it turns out it's going to be about 3 weeks. So we'll find out when we find out. But obviously they're sending him home. And AD, we look at this, and I think I don't want to dwell too much on what the loss of Rantanen would mean, because I think everyone's aware of what the loss of Rantanen would mean. On the bright side, this team has gotten 64% of its scoring after this game from guys not named McKinnon, Rantanen, or Landeskog. So they've gotten a little more balanced scoring, something that was so important in the last couple seasons. They're getting it now, but it also means that if Rantanen's out, now some of these lines have to shift. Who would be the candidate in case he was gone for a while, and how would that impact some of the scoring lines that the Avalanche have been assembling?
Well, we saw Andre Burakovsky take Rantanen's spot tonight on the first line. Presumably that will be the case moving forward. Burakovsky's played well in the first games and would deserve that, I think, and he's a more natural right winger. Probably we'd see a second line go back to Kadri, Donskoy, and Jost, I would imagine. With Jost back on the left wing, we'd probably see JT Compher go back to center on the third line. The Avs will just have to try and bail out the water until, how long Mikko's going to be out. I mean, this is, if anything, there's a positive, as they say in this game, take a look at the positives. This injury happened early in the season, not late. There's plenty of time to recover. But the way that knee, that the whole left leg was sort of twisted weirdly, and I've got a picture up on ColoradoHockeyNow.com that shows the actual moment where it was twisted. It doesn't look good. It looks like one of those cringy, you got to look away kind of pictures. So Mikko's a tough kid, though. I know he's he's a young kid, and if anything, he's going to work hard to get back. But I do think that we're looking at a situation where the Avs are going to be tested a little bit with their depth, and everybody's going to have to move up a notch and play a little bit harder. And the good news is they're 7-1-1 after 9 games, and they're coming home for a couple of days. They don't play again until Friday in Vegas, but they're going to be home until Tuesday through Thursday. And we'll just see what the results say. There's been a lot of injuries over the years, and you just have to deal with them and come back as best you can and deal with them in hockey. That's part of hockey.
We're talking with fan Avalanche insider Adrian Dater, Dater on Twitter, and as he pointed out, ColoradoHockeyNow.com. I guess this is the bright side. I'm trying to look at the positives as well. So often early in the season, people don't, and teams don't necessarily look at their records and they say, well, it's early, we'll worry about peaking later, this and that. But the truth of the matter is the Avalanche have already banked a lot of early points, almost as good as you can do it. Really, they're only 3- away from the maximum they could have. This is when you actually look at those early schedule games, say this was why it was important to go after these guys, because if we're going to be missing Mikko for any stretch of time, we've already banked an awful lot of points. And they're through this 5 out of the 6 games. Vegas finishes it off on Friday, as you pointed out. Then the schedule sort of normalizes, at least until mid-November. There's no long road streaks. So it feels to me like the investment that the Avs had in focusing on coming out hot, something they haven't done in a while, really paid off in this case, no matter what it is with Rantanen, whether it's serious or otherwise.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, we're still talking about a very positive situation here. I mean, 7-1-1 after 9 games. All right, you got an injury to a guy, but he's going to come back. And, let's say it's the worst case scenario in the world, torn ACL. He'd probably be back for late in the season. So, it's ironic that I'm trying to look on the positives. I used to be known as a guy who looked always on the negatives, half glass empty kind of guy, but I'm trying to change my ways. Things will be okay. Sometimes injuries are good for a team short term too. I still remember, I think it was 1997 or so, Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic went out with injuries at the same time. I, among many other people, wrote the Avs right off, said they'll never survive this. And I think the Avs went something like 12-0-2 in their absence. Usually you survive. You can survive injuries short term. You don't usually survive them long term. So, again, even if it's a long term injury, I think the good news is Mikko will be back this season. And that's all that matters in the end. You want a healthy team going into the playoffs. Mikko's a young guy. I can't imagine that there's nothing that injury didn't seem that serious. It looked more like to me like it was just I don't want to play doctor here really, so I shouldn't say anything, but to me it didn't look like a knee injury where, sometimes when you have those, you're down for like 5 minutes and you have to be stretchered off the ice.
Right.
It seemed like Mikko could leave the ice, and hopefully it's just that. It's a kind of a sprain, stretched tendon or something. And again, we have to wait. We always have to wait with the Avalanche and injuries. The Avs officially say that there won't be any further news on him until Tuesday at the earliest. So I'll do my best to dig out the information earlier than that. But again, it's still a positive situation. The Avs will be okay moving forward. I mean, they need Mikko Rantanen to have any chance to win a Stanley Cup, I think. The good news is he will be back.
You brought up the idea that sometimes in short term, a team it's an opportunity for some guys to step up. And leading the team in shots today, though he didn't get on the scoreboard, was Tyson Jost. On Saturday, Tyson Jost against the not insignificant Tampa Bay Lightning put up a hat trick. Now, Jost is one of those guys that if he really starts to break out, you have to change the way the Avalanche profiles as a team entirely. And now he may be one of those guys getting extended ice time in the case of Rantanen's departure to injury.
Oh, for sure. I think you're going to see a lot more Tyson Jost moving forward. He's had a great game at Tampa Bay. He had a good road trip. He's the kid has worked hard. He doesn't score every night. He can frustrate you at times, and he still needs to work on his overall consistency. You didn't hear from him too much tonight. So that's always the problem. There's always a game. It seems like that he sort of takes a step back sometimes after a good game. He's got to develop that. What I would say is a good 3 out of every 4 games that you play in the NHL. It's hard to play a perfect game every night. It'd be great, but if you can do 2 to 3 out of 4 games, then you're ahead of the curve here in the NHL. He's still got to get there. But the question will be, do they put him on left wing on the second line if he goes out, or do they just sort of keep him on the third line, maybe move Comfer up to the second line winger spot? Good question there. I'm not sure I know the answer. I think Jared Bednar likes to have him as a center on the third line. I don't think he's I think we saw that Jared Bednar already didn't see enough from Jost to warrant being a second line winger already. He's already been demoted in a sense. I know Comfer was out for a period, and that's why he was moved down, but Comfer has returned, and we still see Joe's on that third line. So it's going to be an interesting question where Joe's goes. But look, the kid had a hat trick the other night in Tampa Bay. I think he's gradually improving his game and his career. That said, this is an unforgiving league, and you can't just rest on your laurels for one game. The great players never do. He has to keep being consistent and moving forward.
He is Adrian Dater. Check him out on Twitter at @Dater and all the work at Colorado Hockey Now. And maybe we'll have a chance to touch base with you tomorrow if we find anything to do with Mikko that is significant.
For sure, Sean.
All right. Thank you so
keep
much.
You posted.
Will do. Thanks so much, AD. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. Have a good night. That was our Avalanche insider, Adrian Dater. Thanks to Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche. Not great news. Obviously, Mikko Rantanen, the Avs' big money guy, and has been delivering down with a knee injury. But as Adrian pointed out, not the kind of injury where he's down on the ice for 5 minutes. You hope it's something minor, and we may know a little bit better tomorrow. Going back to the Broncos, you may have a better idea in the next week or two who's going to be with this team going forward. A couple of the players you've known and maybe really loved for the last couple seasons probably won't be here. We'll talk about one in particular next. The Broncos, as you are probably well aware, are now 2-5 playoff chances. Goodbye. They were hanging by a thread anyway, but not only the standings, but the way the Broncos lost, it's okay to start shoveling a little dirt on their playoff hopes. That basically the chances of making it disappear pretty rapidly. They're not going to catch the Chiefs. Obviously, they're not in the same class as the Chiefs. Obviously, meaning that the only way, despite the fact the AFC is a little underwhelming in spots, and when I mean a little underwhelming, I mean a lot underwhelming. The Bengals are 0-7. The Dolphins are 0-6. The Jets are 1-5. But the Chargers and Broncos are 2-5. Everyone in the AFC South has at least 3 wins. And the Buffalo Bills over the AFC East have 5. So the Broncos are already 7 games in, 2 out of the final wild card spot. And they have one of the tougher schedules left on the board. So, time to move on there. The question is, what else will the Broncos move on for? Adam Schefter had a story where he basically said that the Broncos are going to get a lot of offers for Emmanuel Sanders. On Friday, I said the one player the Broncos could and probably should trade is Sanders. Schefter indicated that there will be probably a great deal of activity as we get in close to the trade deadline of the 29th. Panthers, Patriots, Eagles, 49ers, all teams that need wide receivers in a big way. Do you imagine replacing Jacoby Myers on the Patriots with Emmanuel Sanders? Yeesh. You could try to do right by Emmanuel and get him a ring or something, although I don't know if you want that 32nd pick in every round. Regardless, there are going to be opportunities. Sanders is a free agent at the end of the year. There's very little reason to think he would stay. There's very little reason to think that very many of the Broncos free agents will stay, so they'd like to move along. Now, the idea, though, is that Sanders will somehow get a day 2 draft pick for you. That would mean a second or a third rounder. Throw the idea of a second rounder right out the window. That's not happening. The idea, of course, is that other teams are so desperate that you might get a third. Remember, last year, Demaryius Thomas, who has a less lengthy injury history than Sanders, who's younger than Sanders, who was also going to be a free agent at the end of the year, drew a 4th-round draft pick for the Broncos from the Texans last year. To get a third from Sanders, you're going to have a couple teams get into a bidding war, and maybe you will. Look, I imagine the Patriots would give up a third because that's going to be pick number 96, okay? Or 95. So they'd probably give one up. To them, it's been pretty much the same as a 4th. Who cares? Broncos probably would like to aim a little higher for that, but I guess even the last pick of the 3rd round is better than any pick in the 4th. Maybe they can get it. Maybe they can. Only 10 days ago, John Elway said, quote, "No one from our side is on the trading block." 10 days ago. Oh, how times change. Already on the RamosLaw.com text line 303-713-1043. Got a text from Jose. I'm ready to turn the page, get rid of Vaughn. I don't think the Broncos are going to trade Von Miller, and I've been on record, I've been consistent. I don't think they should trade Von Miller. I don't think there's an advantage to trading a guy at perhaps his lowest value in the last however many years. I get that he has a controllable contract, and I get that teams probably realize that if the Broncos were to give up on Von Miller, they're probably making a mistake. He's still affecting games. He's still affecting plays, despite the fact he's double or triple teamed on all his rushes. And I would still argue that despite the fact that Vic Fangio and Von Miller each have basically said there's no problem with the defensive fit, I think there's a bit of a problem with the defensive fit. I think that you look at a team like the Patriots, watch what they do as they lay waste to their opponents. They put guys in position to do what they do best and don't put them in positions to do what they don't do best. Von Miller's best when he's running the quarterback. He's not best roaming a sideline covering a dump-off pass. But he's required to do that in this defense. You go look at the film. Tape, recording, We don't use film. We don't use tape. Recording. Go look at the video. He's out there more often than he should be. So I'm not surprised that he can't necessarily affect the game the way everyone would like him to affect the game. And he doesn't have Bradley Chubb on the other side. Malik Reed is nice. Malik Reed's an undrafted rookie. He's not going to get the respect that Von Miller gets. The funny thing is, every stat, don't be surprised, by the way, if over the course of the season, Malik Reed starts getting a little bit of credit for being really good, and everyone talks about how great Malik Reed is. Malik Reed might be really good. But don't be fooled and think that Malik Reed's not going to have opportunities that he has now because everyone's focused on Von Miller on the other side. They are. That's how it's going to work, okay? But if this is the last week and a half that Emmanuel Sanders is going to be on the team, should you play him against the Colts? Your playoff chances are over, right? You know that Sanders can be a little bit fragile. He's that sports car that looks awesome when it's running right, but little things break on it all the time. And they're all really expensive, right? Or so I've heard. Don't really have one. But you have that fancy sports car and, the taillight on it breaks and it costs $300 to fix it. You can't just go down to the old auto parts store and pick one up for $6 and fix it yourself. It doesn't work like that. So do you even risk playing Emmanuel Sanders? I would argue you wouldn't if you feel you're going to trade him for a couple of reasons. One, your wins and losses don't actually matter that much anymore. If the idea for Sanders is now to get trade value out of him after you picked up his option, well, then you need to do what you can to maximize that trade value. Second, and maybe even more importantly, presuming that, I guess, given the targets over the season, given the targets, I get, over the last couple of games, I guess your new starting wide receiver when Sanders is traded is Deshaun Hamilton. I mean, he has 11 targets on the year. That's the most of any wide receiver not named Sutton or Sanders, and it's the most by a decent amount. So, presumably, he's the guy. The only other wide receiver with targets at all on the Broncos, by the way, is return man Deontay Spencer, who has a grand total of 2 targets for 2 catches and 13 yards, and Fred Brown, who has 1 target for 1 catch and 5 yards. So it's going to be Deshaun Hamilton. So it's twofold in this case. If the Broncos are going to move away from Sanders, I said on Friday that they should. I said on Friday that I think they will. Now Adam Schefter over the weekend suggests that they will. You're going to trade Sanders. Why risk him getting hurt? Be able to tell somebody coming up to the trading deadline on the 29th that, no, he's totally fresh. We didn't even play him against the Colts. He's healthy. The old healthy scratch. Wanted to make sure that you, Panthers, Eagles, Niners, Patriots, that you guys got the healthiest version of Emmanuel Sanders you could get. So we didn't play him. Now we'd like a 3rd-round pick, please. That's the biggest part of it. That's the most immediate part. That's the short term. But the long-term part is if Deshaun Hamilton is going to be your starting wide receiver, and there is nobody else on the roster who they've given any indication would be, you better get him some work, right? If you want to find out if he can be a long-term answer for you, if you want to be serviceable, if you want Courtland Sutton to occasionally face a single coverage the rest of the year, you need to play Deshaun Hamilton and get him ready, quick. So, yeah, that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't play him against the Colts. You should rest him so you can deal him, and you need to give Deshaun Hamilton those snaps. You're going to have to force feed him that role because you don't have anybody else. You're not going to start Juwan Winfrey after not throwing him a pass in the first 7 games. It's not going to happen. I get it. I'm a CU buff. That'd be cool, but it's not going to happen. Nor should it happen. Hamilton deserves the first crack at it. Whether you're disappointed about that drop in Oakland or not, or the mistakes he still makes. Whether it's drops, whether it's running the wrong route. The only way to fix it, reps. Reps and more reps. They should start that immediately. Let's go to the RamosLaw.com text line. Talk to John. How are you, John?
Hey, Sean, I'm good. How are you, sir?
I am doing well.
Good. Splendid. Thank you for taking the call. I wanted to piggyback off of your idea on Sanders, but in a more macro sense, talk about the whole team, the Denver Broncos 2019, management-wise, roster construction-wise.
Sure.
If I may.
Please do.
So I'll preface it with this, a trade happening tonight, which I heard DMac say on the drive. Garyon Conley, Raiders 2017 first-round pick cornerback,
right,
traded to Houston. And Houston, for people who pay attention, Houston was a potential, quote-unquote, targeted destination for Chris Harris if he was available. So putting that out there just because one domino had fallen. And secondly, what you were talking about, what Schefter had said yesterday with Sanders, okay?
Gotcha.
I know you understand, Sean, and I know you'll expound on this once I'm done talking, but the compensatory, how that works, the formula for compensatory picks.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll explain that later.
Sure.
But as a fan, I want to put this out there. This is my opinion. This is one side of the spectrum. But trading, I think at this point in time, the Broncos going into week 8 at the Colts, we need to explore Emmanuel Sanders firstly, but not only him, Chris Harris, which hurts me to say, and then Derek Wolfe. Those three players, just due to, on a macro sense, the compensatory formula.
Right.
I think at this point in time, not with Fangio and his regime, but the discontent, the malcontent, and how screwed up it is, Derek Wolfe and Chris Harris, lifelong Broncos, on their second, going on third contract if they re-signed. Do you think they're going to re-sign with Elway?
No. Why? With all due respect, if you're on the wrong side of 30 and you're trying to go ahead and look at your next contract, are you going to re-sign with a team that just lost 3 straight seasons and doesn't look any better than they did 3 years ago?
Correct. And I think the players, for one, are looking in an opposite direction, specifically those 3 players. And then secondly, the organization is looking the other direction as well. So they're both crisscrossing each other. So as a fan, it's easy for me to say trade Emmanuel for a third. I would swap him for a third-round compensatory from San Francisco or Philly. I would swap Derek Wolfe, I think, for a 5th round. And that's not easy for me to say. But I just think there's no chance he's resigning here. So we might as well fetch in 2020 draft capital what we can. And you'll explain this later, but if we resign our own players, and these are 3 players I'll mention besides the other 3 I want to trade, Shelby Harris, Will Parks,
right,
Justin Simmons.
Sure.
So giving those 3 guys extensions does not count for the comp pool, correct, if we re-sign them?
Right.
So I would rather give those 3 guys money, and I know it's tough. But Emmanuel's not coming back. He was a Pittsburgh guy. Chris Harris, if we don't trade him, I want Elway to pay him before October 31st, and I know that's not happening. So if he can go to the Eagles or the Niners and compete for a third-round draft pick, I would probably do that for Chris, and by no means am I saying he's washed up. I want him to be a Ring of Famer, and I wish Elway would have already gave him that third contract.
Yeah. John, thank you for the call. I appreciate it, and a lot of really good points there. I will break down how the compensatory the picks work and why it matters for the 2020 draft next. The Broncos seem set to make some trades. Emmanuel Sanders first and foremost. Should they play him? I don't think they should play him against the Colts. I really don't. The trade deadline is October 29th. John made a really good call on the RamosLaw.com text line. If you would like to join in, you can do that. 303-713-1043. Got some text there talking about more than a few names here and there. But the idea of Sanders being traded potentially for a third-round pick, that's what Adam Schefter suggests the Broncos might be able to get, maybe should be able to get for Sanders. Looking at the three main free agents that are not likely to sign, Sanders, Chris Harris Jr., and Derek Wolfe. Why would you? All 30 or so, all have had a taste of success and would like to have one more before they retire, and they're on a team that for the last 3 years has been spinning their wheels. And spinning their wheels might put it kindly. We don't know where the Broncos are going to land here. They won 5 games 2 years ago, 6 games last year. I had them pegged to win 7 this year. That's looking like a long shot. They might be going backwards again. The 6-win season might have been the peak. So if I'm any of those guys, I'm not re-signing either. I want to go somewhere I can win. Now, in Harris and Wolf case, they're lifelong Broncos, not in Sanders. So Sanders has no problem moving on to the next spot. But I don't think Harris does either. Harris has been hinting at trades. It's been reported multiple times he wanted some. Who knows? But here's the catch with the compensatory draft picks. It's a complicated formula. It's based on what a free agent of yours that you lose signs for, the amount of money they sign for. That's the deal. The more they sign for, the higher draft pick you get in return. However, it's also dependent on the free agents you sign and the money that you give them. So if the Broncos go spend big-time free agent money, they may not get those compensatory draft picks from players of theirs that leave. This is why the idea of a trade comes up. In Sanders' case, like I said on Friday, I think they should make the trade, and I think they will make a trade. Especially if you can get a third, which is higher than what I thought. I thought if what you got a fourth was for Thomas last year, knowing he was younger, had less of an injury history, and otherwise in the same financial situation, I figured that you would probably get a fourth at best for Sanders. Schefter believes, based on some teams that are in good playoff position, but wide receiver desperate, you can get a third. And that makes sense. So go that route. If you are the Broncos, though, and you're looking at the other two players, you look at Derek Wolfe, for example. John suggested they could maybe trade him for a 5th-round compensatory pick. And by the way, you can now trade compensatory picks. That's something the Denver Broncos actually brought up and eventually got approved. I don't think Derek Wolfe nets you a 5th-round pick. I think Derek Wolfe nets you a 6th or a 7th-round pick, given his injury history, given the age, given the mileage, given the fact that that position, he's not an elite pass rusher from that spot. So I think he's a nice player, certainly a fan favorite player. But I think you look around the league, the evaluation of him would be, all right, we might be able to start him. We can definitely use him, but we're not desperate to rent a guy like that. What are we willing to pay? And I think if you're only going to get a 7th for him, don't make the trade. Hope that maybe he plays great the rest of the year, racks up some numbers, signs a decent contract with someone else, and then maybe you get a 6th or a 5th in compensatory. If you get a 6th for Wolf, maybe. But I think even for that, I think I'd rather have him play it out and know that for the Broncos, you have a motivated Derek Wolfe who's out there to go put up some numbers and get paid. For Chris Harris, the situation is very different. Now, I've talked about this for weeks. The market that Chris Harris wants has not been there for 30-plus cornerbacks in the last 3 seasons. The big money, $12 million-plus deals are not there for guys of his age. They're just not. And it's not going to be in this offseason either. But it only takes one. Chris Harris is a good player who I think still has plenty left in the tank. I am not trading Chris Harris for anything less than a 3rd-round pick because I think while I guess the Broncos will probably, my best guess is they might get a 4th-round compensatory for Harris when he signs. I think you're probably better off keeping him around because otherwise your starting cornerbacks are Devontae Harris and Duke Dawson Jr. I don't think the Broncos want to get humiliated game after game while those guys learn on the job. So I think for Harris, the trick is if you can't get a 3rd, keep him. For Wolf, unless someone's willing to offer you a 5th, if it's a 5th, you take it. If it's a 6th, maybe. Depends. If it's a 6th from the Patriots, no, don't bother. The 6th from someone who's in the middle, okay. But I think that's the maximum of where you go if you're the Broncos. Compensatory draft picks, by the way, would be involved in the 2021 draft, not the 2020 draft. 2021 draft because the guys have to be signed during the 2020 offseason, which can happen before or after the draft. So that's how that all goes together. On Mondays, I'd like to go ahead and take a look at the rest of the world in sports, put together a little segment that Kevin Kistner, our producer in there, has hooked up. We like to call it Weekend Warriors. We'll let you know who ours were next. That's right. Every Monday, we like to take a tour around sports, take a peek at what happened everywhere, and pick out who we thought did the finest job. We like to call it our Weekend Warriors. Kevin Kistner and I pick these guys out, and we pick out our favorite four. We take two each of who we think are going to be the guys that stood out. Because, let's face it, sports are fun. Like, all the sports are fun. We all watch all the sports. There's always something good, on whether it's local team or not. So I like to pick it out. Kevin, you want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off. So
Okay.
Let's go back to Saturday night.
Gotcha.
Once DJ LeMahieu ties the game up for the Yankees in the bottom of the bottom of the ninth. Top of the ninth.
Yeah. Man, I'm still hurting about that one.
But it kind of felt good rubbing it in Jeff Bridges' face, but that's not my
DJ's so good.
Yeah. Because I'm sitting there and they show the scorecard 0 for 4. I was like, there's no way the dude's going 0 for 5 in a game.
Oh, and he went Oppo, mind you.
Yeah.
Oppo game-tying home run.
To tie it up in the ninth.
Jeez.
So my weekend warrior, though, to start off, it's going to be Jose Altuve.
Yeah. Love Jose
The
Altuve.
walk-off home run to win it and send your team to the World Series.
Off Aroldis Chapman, no less.
Yes.
Dude brings it 103, and yeah.
That was...
Altuve waited on one and smacked it right down that left field power out. Yeah. He's hitting 348 in this postseason, by the way. That wasn't like just an out-of-the-blue thing. He is a monster. A 5'6" Tasmanian devil monster.
And then did you hear the story over the weekend, too, of how the Astros turned him down when he was like 16?
No.
Coming from Venezuela. He came for a tryout. They said, nope, you're too short. And they sent him away.
Ooh.
And then they said he's too young. Comes back the next day with his birth certificate and says, no, I'm eligible to play. And voila, here we are.
Wow.
Pretty insane.
World Series, by the way, starts tomorrow. You catch the games, right here. Will be your World Series follow-up this week. So I'm fine with it. I love it. I love World Series. I'm a baseball fan. I'm psyched. Ring it. Number 3 had number 4 that is 4 touchdowns. Marvin Jones Jr. The Lions lost to the Vikings, but it was not his fault. Only the third guy in history to get 4 receiving touchdowns in a game.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know if I could count the other guys.
One's Jerry Rice. The other was Sterling Sharp.
Wow.
That's it.
I would guess Calvin Johnson, but obviously.
That's it. Rice, Sterling Sharp, Marvin Jones Jr.
Unbelievable.
And he could have had 5. He actually dropped one at the end of the first half. I mean, he was unstoppable. I don't know how you beat that. He's got to be on our list, obviously.
See, those are the type of receivers I want. Just guys that can catch the ball and just make the play. So I'm okay moving on from Sanders. Just give me capable guys.
Yeah, Marvin Jones Jr. was certainly capable this weekend. Ring it.
All right, my guy. Not the biggest fan of him, but when you go out and play perfect, you got to give him some credit. Aaron Rodgers, perfect quarterback rating, 6 total touchdowns, 5 in the air, 1 on the ground, and 429 passing yards. You kidding me?
Rodgers went nuts in that game. Funny thing, for a little bit, it actually looked like the Raiders were going to be in that game. And then all of a sudden, bam, they were not. And remember, only two of his starting receivers, right? Geronimo Allison and Marquez Valdez-Scantling were game-time decisions to even play. That was it. Jake Kumaro gets 54 yards. Danny Vitale gets 43 yards. Alan Lazard gets 42 yards. Jamal Williams gets 26 yards, a touchdown. Allison only had 33 yards. Valdez-Scantling, he had 133 and a touchdown on only 2 catches. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers was dealing. That is as. It's tough to say when it's Aaron Rodgers, but that's as good as I've ever seen him play.
Oh yeah,
It's as good as I guess anyone's ever played. Passing rate is perfect.
That could go down as one of the greatest passing games ever.
He had 5 touchdowns, 5 touchdown passes, and 6 incompletions.
Think about that. I think the offense out there is finally working with Matt LaFleur.
It seems, 42 points. They've lost all of one game. Yeah, Packers are rolling. Ring it. Number 1. I do like going local when we can, and we can, actually, on Saturday against the Tampa Bay Lightning, last year's President's Trophy winner. Is Callie Agnew still out here?
She's gone.
She's gone. Okay, 'cause she would have been very excited. She was in the booth for a little while helping you out there. Callie's our resident Avs nut. And Tyson Jost goes for the Hattie against the Lightning in Tampa. The Avs were actually they ended up losing tonight, but in that game on Saturday against the Tampa Bay Lightning, Tyson Jost ends up carrying the offensive load for the Lightning. And when you look at the way that game went, this was a game that they started Pavel Francouz. This was a game that they kind of expected to maybe let it go, right? Nope. 3 minutes in, Jost punches in his first one. Ends up 1-1. Well, second period, 3 minutes into the second period, Jost punches in number 2. And then the floodgates open. Landeskog scores at 5:48. Jost gets the hat trick at 6 minutes and 6 seconds. Jost got 3 goals, if you're doing the math there, 26 minutes and 6 seconds. Yeah, that'll do it. I think that'll get you number 1.
I threw my hat at the TV, too.
Yeah.
I got excited.
Well, that's the best kind, because then you get it back.
Yeah.
Although generally they donate it to kids and stuff, so it's not that bad.
Have you ever seen a hat trick live?
I actually have at a DU Pioneers game.
Okay. If you were at an Avs game and an Avs does it, would you throw your hat onto the ice?
I would have to have pretty good seats, because if you're not close, those hats don't fly very far. And then my worry is I'm gonna like hit an elderly person in the back of the head and then hurt them or get sued.
You end up 3 rows short of the glass.
Right. But if I'm 3 rows like from the ice, yep.
$35 hat just gone.
You only live once.
That's true.
You got to do it once, right? How many times do you get to do it? And you're donating it to a kid. The Avs donate it to charities.
That's fair.
So I mean, who are you hurting? Yeah, I would. If I knew I could get it there, I would.
I will say this: it is nice to see someone on this team scoring not on the first line this year.
64% of the Avs goals. I actually did the math here right before this game, before we went on the air today. 64% of the Avs goals are not scored by that front line of Rantanen, McKinnon, and Landeskog this year. That is an enormous difference. When all of last year, even when the Avs really kind of surprised people, it was still generated by, it was either that top line or bust.
Well, and how many extra minutes last year did the top line have to play?
Right.
Come playoff time, they're playing, 25 minutes it felt like.
Right. They were really playing pretty heavily. It was a bad situation there where they had to do it. But in this case, now McKinnon is leading the team with 11 points. He had a goal tonight. Rantanen, who was hurt, we'll find out more about that hopefully tomorrow, also has 11. And Landeskog has 7. He's fourth. But Andrei Burakovsky has 8. Cale Makar has 7. Donskoy 6. Jost 5. Kadri 5. Calvert with 5. They're getting scoring up and down, and that's one of the reasons that even after the injury to Rantanen, that you hope it isn't serious, but it might be, the Avs actually finally feel like they might have enough talent to weather the storm, and someone like Tyson Jost, a big part of it. So ring it. We got to give him the bell, right? Yeah, so our weekend Warriors. Jose Altuve, walk-off homer against the Yankees. Marvin Jones Jr.'s 4 touchdowns against the Vikes. Aaron Rodgers basically showing people how it's done. This is how you play quarterback against the Raiders. And, Broncos fans don't mind watching the Raiders get their noses rubbed in a bit. That never hurts. And then Tyson Josty, getting the Hattie against the Lightning. It's our weekend Warriors.
Pretty impressive.
Not bad. It's a pretty good lineup.
I just wish they were on my fantasy team. Any of them.
Yeah, I didn't have any of them. Any fantasy team. Nope, not any of them. But, maybe there's your pickups for this week. I don't mean to take Cecil's gig, but there you go. Maybe see if Marvin Jones Jr. is available in your league. I'm pretty sure someone has Aaron Rodgers, but maybe Marvin Jones Jr. is out there. Maybe go grab him.
I have Tom Brady just on my bench.
Yeah, well, that's where he finished this game, too, because they didn't need him. Jared Stidham did the job. We'll talk about the Broncos and about whether it is time to start preparing for Drew Lock next. Want to go straight to the RamosLaw.com text line? That's 303-713-1043. I have a couple guys on hold. We'll start with Butch. Butch, how are you?
Getting it on with Sean. How's it going?
I'm all right. I mean, it's Monday, but what are you going to do?
KK Money a little bit.
Yeah?
I did call and vent my frustration after the Kansas City game. There's two things I want to get to. First of all, I want to get to what this team could look like next year. Yikes. I mean, you're talking about 4th, 5th round picks for Sanders and people like that, but kind of want to get your opinion, being a semi-professional handicapper myself, about the Colts game. And I thought it was I looked at it online. I thought it was a misprint because this business I go through, I don't know if you want me to give you the name.
No.
No. Okay, it doesn't matter. I didn't give the name, but you have to advertise it on your station. But so I was like, okay, I'll do a little bit on that. The Colts minus 6.5, and the line actually went to 6. I just people listening out there, the odds makers try to trick you with NFL games, making it look like you're missing something. Perfect example, the Jets game.
Which sounds like we might have dropped you there, but I get what you're at when you're talking about that, the way things are made, and obviously I'm not a professional in any way, but yeah, that's why people look at lines, and they're an interesting thing for analysis purposes. But the idea, of course, is that people want you to believe that they're just trying to make sure that they hit it 50-50. That the 50% of the people who are interested in one team and 50% of the other, and that way your house wins. So that's the plan. But the Broncos obviously find themselves in a pretty bad spot at the moment. The Colts are favored by 6 in a year where these lines are enormous because there is such a schism between the top and bottom teams. 6 isn't even all that much anymore, but it is kind of interesting to look at it because the Broncos just looked absolutely atrocious, and they've looked atrocious in a few of their games, but they were a disaster against the Chiefs. And of course, the Colts played the Chiefs in Kansas City 2 weeks ago and beat the Chiefs. Oh, and then they went on to beat the Texans. You talk about a team that the Broncos were kind of like, oh, we're a couple plays from being whatever, right? They lost by 7 to the Raiders. They lost by 6 to the Chargers. The Chiefs or the Colts, pardon me, are 15 points away from being 6-0. They're not a joke. And I warned everyone that when Andrew Luck retired, like, go look at Jacoby Brissett and look how this team ran with him. It's not like they were new. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. I expect the Colts to win this game. We'll see as the week goes on. I don't think I'm going to change my mind. I don't see it unless something happens. But, yeah, the Colts are pretty good. So let's keep it going. Talk to Keegan. Keegan, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, John?
I'm all right. Thank you.
So kind of getting back to talking about trading guys off and seeing where the team's direction is going to be going. One thing I wanted to ask you about was Elway's always had this mentality and the approach going into the draft of drafting the best players. And you mentioned how thin we'd be at the quarterback position if we got rid of Harris. Will Elway kind of need to change his approach to that? I mean, if the best guy on the board's not a corner at that point, but if that's our position of need, I feel like we're getting so thin at certain positions that it's going to just have to change up, and his mentality and approach to the draft will have to change.
Yeah, Keegan, and then I'll answer this. I'll keep you on here real quick too. I'll just tell us for everybody. That's a myth. Teams like to say, "Oh, we just take the best player on the board," because they want to have some sort of a poker face. That's not true. Good teams, smart teams, and virtually every team I've ever covered, you take the best player on the board at a position of need. And that's what you do every time. They like to say it. They're like, oh, we'll just do our best guy on the board. No one actually does that because, let's be honest, that would be crazy, right? I mean, you're not going to see certain teams do that. Already have a star player. The Browns, for example, are not going to take their first round pick and go get a wide receiver. I mean, why? Why would you do that? They're not going to go get a quarterback. They got their quarterback, whether he's been disappointing or not. So teams don't really do that. In Denver's case, yeah, you'd be looking at, hey, we desperately need a cornerback. So we may look at the best position of need as a cornerback. That's why when the Broncos picked Bradley Chubb, right? They really liked Baker Mayfield. They really liked Sam Darnold. They would have very seriously considered either one of those guys had they dropped and probably picked them because they knew they desperately needed a quarterback. But they also liked Bradley Chubb, and they figured at the number 5 pick, they're going to get one of those 3, and they were satisfied with holding there. So they went and they got Chubb because they did need all of them. But does that make sense that that's actually what teams do? And that's even what John Elway's done. Now, you can argue that if he's picked the right people, but he's generally gone after positions they've needed, with the exception of, well, this year, right? Thanks for the call, Keegan. Appreciate that. But that's the trick is teams never do that. They say it, but they don't. Okay, they're always picking the best player on their board at a position of need. And so that's, I think, where the Noah Fant pick, to some people, it baffled folks, right? But the Broncos don't have a tight end. They've never been able to count on Jeff Hireman or Jake Butt to stay healthy. They picked a mid-round guy, a late-round guy in Fumagalli last year. They basically didn't have a starting tight end at all. And so when people said, oh, my gosh, the Broncos reached for a tight end, well, maybe they did. But what they did was they picked the best available player on their board at a position of need. Now, I would argue that you're maybe not prioritizing the positions in which you have larger needs if you're picking a tight end in the first round. You also, the part of that equation that maybe has been missing for the Broncos is the fact that there are certain positions you need to prioritize higher than others. I liked the Bradley Chubb pick. I did. I think Bradley Chubb's going to be a terrific player. I think he is a terrific player. I thought the Broncos should have gotten Quentin Nelson. That's the player that I felt very firmly they should have gotten. And I had no problem if they wanted to go for Mayfield or Darnold, and I know Darnold looked terrible tonight, but I would have had no problem with either of those picks. I was fine with Mayfield. I was fine with Darnold. Chubb was fine. He was safe. I would have picked Nelson because I saw offensive line as a higher priority need than linebacker. That's just the way I saw it. Now, I take a look at the Broncos line right now. They don't have Bradley Chubb. He's hurt. That's bad luck. But if I looked at their line and I saw Dalton Reisner at one guard and Quentin Nelson at the other, I'd feel a lot more bullish about the Broncos' chances in the near term. Even more than if they had Bradley Chubb. Even knowing that Bradley Chubb will be back next year and probably at full strength. Von Miller did it. Same injury. Came back and had multiple double-digit sack seasons in a row. So as good as Bradley Chubb is, I would feel better about the Broncos because I feel that the offensive line was a bigger need. Your quarterback, whoever it is, can't function if your offensive line isn't good. Your running backs, however good they are, can't function at their best if their offensive line isn't good. Your wide receivers can't function unless your offensive line and your quarterbacks are doing well. So to my mind, when you look at offense especially, those positions, there's a bit of a little decision tree, right? You have to go down this, to go down this, to go down this, to go down this. So I didn't mind the pick for Chubb because it was unlikely Chubb would be a bust a la Paxton Lynch, who I thought would be a bust the day he was selected. Go check the YouTube. But I did think that Nelson should have been the pick. I think that the offensive linemen are harder to find. And I think the Broncos fell for the old myth that, well, you can find guards, you just can't find tackles. Well, you really have a tough time finding both. And you'll notice teams are scheming to bring pressure from everywhere, and your guards are every bit as important as your tackles, and you definitely need them in the running game, especially if you want to run any sort of clever offensive schemes that include pulling guards. And that's why Quentin Nelson immediately became an all-pro player, and it might, literally this early into his career, looks like a guy that might be in the Hall of Fame when he's done. So I thought that was the pick. For the Broncos, when it gets to their draft picks, they're always going to pick the best player at a position of need. The question with the Broncos over the last however many years is, are they prioritizing the positions correctly? And I would argue that they have not. And I would argue that that's why they are where they are. The Broncos' biggest hole is the same hole it's been for a long time. It is offensive line first and foremost. By a lot. By a wide margin over every other position on this team. They have not shored that up, and they're paying the consequences for it. You couldn't have a worse game than the Broncos had on Thursday against a team with a worse defense coming into that game than the Broncos did. And it was simply because they had no offensive line ability. The Chiefs knew it, and the Chiefs forced the Broncos into doing what they wanted them to do. So I think the Broncos have made a mistake there. I would have picked Quentin Nelson instead of Bradley Chubb if I were the Broncos. I said so at the time. I would have selected the best offensive lineman I could have instead of Noah Fant. Or I would have selected an inside linebacker, another position of need. But what's done is done, and I'm not the GM, and nobody at Dove Valley's ever asked me. So, there you go. The Drew Lock watch is in full effect, starting now. He may hit the practice field as soon as tomorrow. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Drew Lock should be starting for this football team. What week should he be starting? Well, I have the right date for that too. I'll tell you next. Sunday, November 17th against the Minnesota Vikings is the day that the Denver Broncos should watch Drew Lock take snaps at quarterback as the new starter. Now, that's my opinion. The Broncos, of course, restructured Joe Flacco's contract to give him an extension, so I have no idea what they're thinking down there at Dove Valley. But the playoff chances are over. Joe Flacco, I won't go as far as Sandy Clough said on Thursday night when he and I hosted the post game together and say that Joe Flacco looks washed up. I don't know if he looks washed up, but he doesn't look like a guy that can lead this team to anywhere special. Everything that you've seen from him is mediocre. And that's okay, because the original plan was Flacco was signed on, he had a 1-year deal. He was going to go 1 year, and the plan was to basically hand it off to Locke in 2020 or even late in 2019 if he's ready. But the contract situation seems to have muddied those waters. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe the Broncos are wise enough to understand that should still be the plan. They should have stuck with their original plan. It's a good plan. Joe Flacco for part of 2019 until Drew Lock is ready, and then Lock needs to start. He has not been able to practice with the team since he's on injured reserve. So they need to get him back into practice. He's been able to work with VR and everything, but I can play a couple games of Madden too. I don't think I'm ready to step into an NFL huddle. It's not quite the same thing. So Locke does need practice time. He does need to get his feel right. He needs to work on a few things. So let Flacco start at Indianapolis. Let him start at Cleveland. Then you have the entire bye week to plan for Minnesota, to revamp the game plan, to simplify it a little bit. Rich Scangarello did a really good job with Nick Mullins last year for the 49ers. A really good job. You might remember Nick Mullins laying waste to the Broncos last year. That kind of game plan that he gave for Mullins, a little bit of mobility, quick hit stuff, use your tight end. Oh, by the way, the Broncos spent a first-round pick on a tight end, didn't they? Maybe they should use him. That offense that Scangarello helped Nick Mullins adjust and adapt to would be a pretty good one to hand over to Drew Lock for the rest of the year. Get a full bye week to change it over. And on the road against Minnesota, and it's better to start rookies on the road where they don't feel they have to overperform to impress a home crowd. That's the window. Sunday 17th game against Minnesota. Let me go to the RamosLaw.com text line. That's 303-713-1043 if you'd like to participate and talk to Jordan. Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing good, Sean. How you doing?
I'm all right.
Yeah, the last segment you were talking about the offensive line and how that would have been your first priority,
yes, sir.
Drafting Quentin Nelson. And in Elway's eyes, he has addressed the offensive line. He drafted Garrett Bowles in the first round. He overpaid for Ron Leary, who couldn't, make the lineup in Dallas. He, spent a second rounder on the kid from K-State.
Reisner, yeah. And that's a good pick.
He made Juwan James the highest paid right tackle in all of the NFL. So in Elway's eyes, he did try, and he brought in Mike Munchak. So Elway, what does he have to do to get this line, to function as one and not give up 9 sacks? I mean, he's tried to fix the line, but he hasn't been able to.
Well, you pointed out some of it yourself, Jordan. Ron Leary, as you said, couldn't stay in the lineup in Dallas because he couldn't stay healthy. The Broncos signed him, and guess what Ron Leary's problem was? He hasn't been able to stay healthy. Juwan James, as you pointed out correctly, made him the highest paid right tackle in history. It's since been surpassed, but at the time the Broncos wrote that check, that's what they did. Well, why did Dallas let go of Juwan James? If you had a top-tier starting tackle, which is gold. Sorry, I said Kevin corrected me. Miami, I said Dallas. Dallas was Leary. Miami is James. Well, James couldn't stay healthy. He had a history of not being healthy as well. Well, guess what? The two guys that John Elway spent a lot of big money to that had health concerns have had health concerns. What a surprise. Reisner, great pick. Connor McGovern's a guard playing center and looks a little overmatched to me quite frankly. And you started to see that even some bad snaps started to come to the fore against Kansas City. And Garrett Bowles, he just picked the wrong lineman. He went for the big athlete instead of the guy that could play like Ryan Ramczyk. So I get where you're at. Elway may have had the picks and spent the money, Jordan, but he keeps picking, with the exception of Reisner, who looks terrific. He keeps going and getting the wrong guys.
We're back to the question is how does Elway not assess talent, and where do you go from here? He can't fix this line. He can't fix the quarterback. He's broke this team down. It's not working, Sean. Where do they go? What are they going to do? How do they fix this?
Well, and that's a really good question, Jordan, and I really do appreciate the call. Obviously, you really thought that out well and did your research. Really appreciate that. Where the Broncos go from here is tricky. You know, we've talked about that a little bit. I also mentioned it on Friday. Some of this comes down to ownership. Now, I am not one of those guys that likes to call for people's jobs, and I'm not going to do it for John Elway. But I think that John Elway has to understand, and I will give you want a little bit of a silver lining, I'll give you one. The last two drafts following the Bulls draft have looked quite a bit better. Now, I know that's not the most exciting thing in the world to hear. But when you looked at the previous drafts, let's look at, for example, the two that preceded it, 2017, 2016. Garrett Bowles and DeMarcus Walker and Carlos Henderson and Brendan Langley are your top 3-round picks. Two of them are on the team. One of them technically leads your team in sacks, but they've just been kind of the garbage variety. Clean them up because they run into you stuff. So, but I would say it's fair to say that DeMarcus Walker has not been a second-round level impactful pass rusher. I think that's fair. I don't think we'll get a lot of arguments on that one. Garrett Bowles has been, quite frankly, a disaster. The only reason he's starting is because the Broncos don't have any other options. Go back to the 2016 draft. Your top 3 rounds were Paxton Lynch, one of the worst busts in the history of the Broncos. Adam Gotsis, who the Broncos finally seem to have given up on. And Justin Simmons, who looks like a pretty good pick. Okay. But then go down and look at 2018 and 2019. In 2018, Bradley Chubb, Cortland Sutton, Royce Freeman, Isaac Yiadom. They missed on Yiadom. Yiadom's not very good. But the other 3 guys, good. And you know what they did? And you could tell? They were all really productive college players. They weren't just going and getting athletes. They went guys who got it done. Got the job done in college. 2019, Noah Fant, Dalton Reisner, Drew Lock, Draymond Jones. Draymond Jones in limited duty looks good because he's playing at Ohio State. You got to be good to be there. Drew Lock we haven't seen yet. Reisner looks tremendous. And Noah Fant, he has growth to do, but I've made the argument, and I can continue to make it again, and I can show you the numbers left and right. Noah Fant actually is having, believe it or not, I know fans look at the stats and go, oh my goodness. Noah Fant is actually having a better than average rookie year for a tight end. He is. Tight end is a really, really, really tough spot. Maybe I can get into that as well. I'll just touch on that with Fant. You look at the history of rookie tight ends in Fant's case as well. You want to break into the top 10 of all time. If a rookie tight end is receiving, you have to get 600 yards receiving total. Now, at this point, Fant is on pace for 400 yards receiving. It's dropped off as the weeks have gone along. After 3 weeks, he was at 528. But the number of guys that are catches in there, John McKee in 1963 is 5th all-time in receiving. He only did it on 35 catches. Russ Francis in 1975, 636 yards, 8th all-time. Did it on 35 catches. Ken Dilger of the Colts back in 95, he's 9th all-time. He did it on 42 catches. Fant's on pace for 37 catches, 405 yards. You'll notice when you look at the list of names of those top receivers, you will not notice some significant names. No Jason Witten, no Rob Gronkowski, no Jimmy Graham, no Antonio Gates, no O.J. Howard. Get an idea of all those guys, by the way, in their rookie season, had fewer than 45 catches and 550 yards. All of them. Witten, Gronk, Graham, Gates. That's not counting Howard, who came in the 2017 draft, was considered maybe one of the best tight end prospects ever. So Fant's actually been a pretty good pick. So Elway and his front office have been evolving in real time and going away from just getting athletes. They're getting players. Problem is they've kind of just started doing it. It's going to take a little while for everything to get right. Got a number for you following the Patriots game that you're not going to believe. It's Sean Stat of the night. Next. 85 years. 85 years. My stat of the night involves the New England Patriots and their hilariously effective defense. Patriots win tonight 33-0 over the Jets. The Patriots have the league's top scoring offense, 223 points scored, and the league's best defense, only 48 points allowed. It has been 85 years since a team started 7-0 and has allowed fewer than 50 total points. That year was 1934, the second season in which the forward pass was legal. And both the Bears and the Lions did it. 85 years. Let's just say that in the 1930s, the average offense was not as high-tech and explosive as they are now. So I would argue that what the Patriots are doing is more impressive than even that 85 years later. Want some crazier stats on that defense? How's this? The average NFL passer rating opposed, to get an idea of how efficient quarterbacks have become, is 93.3 if you remove the Patriots. The other 31 teams in the league give up a passer rating of 93.3 on average. The Patriots' average passer rating against is 35.8. If you know the bizarre formula that is passer rating, and it is bizarre, we only have 40 minutes left in the show, otherwise I'd try to explain it. It's ridiculous. But an incomplete pass, if a quarterback goes out and throws one pass attempt and it's incomplete, that quarterback earns a passer rating of 39.6. The Patriots' passer rating for the season allowed is 35.8. That's it. 35.8. It's worse than an incomplete pass. Tomorrow morning, go out into your yard, throw a football directly into the dirt, and then walk back inside, and you would have a better passer rating than the Patriots allow on average. That is insane. They're also only allowing a 52.4% completion percentage. They have allowed only 1,173 passing yards in 7 games. That's 168 per game, by the way. They've also allowed 1 passing touchdown in 7 games and picked off the opposing quarterback 18 times. 1-18. Are you kidding me? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. It is ridiculous what the Patriots are doing on defense. I know. First reaction, oh, but they haven't played anybody. Oh, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand. They play in an embarrassingly bad division. I get it. But other teams over the last, 85 years have played in bad divisions too. This is stunning what they're doing. And yes, okay, by and large, they're beating kind of crummy teams. Steelers aren't good. Dolphins are trying to lose. Jets aren't good. They've already beaten them twice. Washington's terrible. The Giants are terrible. The Bills are actually pretty good. And the Bills gave them a fight. Bills' defense held the Patriots to only 16 points. That is, believe it or not, only one time have the Patriots not scored double that when they scored 30 against the Jets. So that Bills game was an anomaly. But they still won, and they only gave up 10 points. When you do something no team has done in 85 years, I don't really care about their current division because everyone has had opportunity to have a lousy division. They haven't even really had receivers healthy. Their offense is a mess. Yikes. I can't stand the Patriots. Not even going to pretend that I do. I can't stand it. But I know when I see greatness, that's greatness. That's impressive. And the longer this goes on, the more impressive it gets. That is something to watch. I can't. How do you even dance around it? You can't. It's spectacular. So there you go. Sean's stat of the night, 85 seasons since we've seen a defense even similar to what the Patriots are doing right now. Who knows how long it'll last, but nevertheless, wow. That is impressive. Going back to the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. Going back to the draft of the Broncos. Got a lot of texts. Go through a couple of with you here real quick. It's from 720 pointed out, I love Bradley Chubb, but think of Quentin Nelson and Ryan Ramczyk instead of Garrett Bowles. Yep. How about if your guards are Quentin Nelson and Dalton Reisner and Ryan Ramczyk is over at right tackle? You've solved some problems. That's for sure. You're on your way. That's amazing. Also, someone, 720-939 pointed out, Sean, you also keep forgetting that John Elway drafted Jake Putt over George Kittle. Yeah, that's true. That's true. From another texter, whoever's choosing the bump music coming in, keep it up. You're doing a fine job. That's Kevin Kistner. You can follow him at Kistner Radio, and he is doing a fine job. He's got to find some stuff to match my personality, and he's nailing it. It's a nice job, Kevin. Get a little love on the RamosLaw.com text line. That's good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Throw him a follow on Twitter. He'll also take requests on Twitter. That's what he told me.
I like to talk to people on Twitter.
Yeah, I do, and I don't.
I mean, if you're going to troll me, I'm not going to.
It all depends on who I'm
talk with
talking
you.
to.
Yeah.
Surprising, I don't really, it's nice. I don't get a lot of trolls, so thank you, folks who follow me on Twitter. I appreciate it. I don't get a lot of trolls.
It's not worth the time. But if you want to talk football, you want to talk Broncos,
yeah,
let's do it.
I get actual conversations, which I appreciate. We get those in the text line by and large too, so thank you. The anonymity in a keyboard don't always present very good results. So appreciate the texters and callers we get here. I've said it before. Drew Lock should be the Broncos starting quarterback on November 17th. Kevin has maybe an idea why he shouldn't be.
Would you?
And oh no.
Are we saving this?
I will dismantle your argument into tiny little bits next.
Okay.
All right. Been telling everyone all night, Sunday, November 17th, against the Minnesota Vikings should be Drew Lock's debut, health permitting, for the Denver Broncos. There is an idea, as we've been talking about also some of the missteps the Broncos have made in the draft, that maybe Drew Lock shouldn't start. And Kevin, you've been following other shows. What's that argument?
I've heard this question a lot, even on Twitter, and it's like, why put Drew Lock out there behind this offensive line?
Why not?
And the thing is I don't have a legit answer.
Yeah, why not, though? I mean, why wouldn't you? Because you're afraid he's going to get hurt?
I mean, if you put him out there and he will show you if you're the guy or not.
Yeah, here's the catch.
It's just going to have the it factor.
Right, and I've said this since literally following the Week 1 loss to Oakland. The Broncos' most important goal remaining left in the season is to find out if Drew Lock is their quarterback going forward or not. Is he their franchise guy? Have to find it out. You would have liked to have been able to maybe find it out in a playoff chase. Well, that's not going to happen. You don't have a choice, okay? But the idea behind that, there's a couple of thoughts, right? People think, okay, you put him behind that line and maybe he'll get hurt. Well, okay, I get that, but football is football, and you can't play as if you're going to get hurt. And oh, by the way, the Broncos line is what it is. You go watch the last 5-6 years of the Broncos, even including even some of their Super Bowl years, it's not like it was necessarily murderer's row the whole way through, okay? Peyton Manning could gloss over some of the deficiencies in those lines as well when he was quarterback. Can't do that when you've had the guys following him. But what are you going to wait for? You're going to wait till the Broncos' offensive line is perfect? Great. When's that going to happen? Is it ever going to happen?
That could be 10 years.
Yeah, is it ever going to happen? You're worried that his confidence is going to get shot behind an offensive line? Well, anything about that, we can't put him behind this offensive line. Well, which offensive line do you want to put him back of? I don't know. General Patton famously said that a good plan executed today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. Eventually, you have to do something, not talk about when it'll be the best time to do something. You actually have to do something. The Broncos are at that point. They have to do something. They're going to probably trade Emmanuel Sanders. You have to do something. Maybe they'll trade other people. You have to do something. The quarterback you have at the moment is 34 years old, will be 35 by next season in only a couple months, and has a touchdown-interception ratio of just about 1-to-1. If you think that's all the offensive line, I can't help you, because it's not. If you think all the sacks are all the line's fault, they're not. Flacco's played a part in that. And no, there's no guarantee that Drew Lock's going to be any better. He might even be worse. But you have to find out. If you don't have the franchise quarterback, then you need to be hunting for the franchise quarterback. And you can't be hunting for one until you know if you have one or not. You cannot wait for the perfect offensive line to start Drew Lock.
And if you need a quarterback, this is the draft to do it.
It's one of them, at least. It's one that's got some pretty high option guys. There's 3 guys. I don't particularly like Justin Herbert from what I've seen myself, but I haven't seen all of his games. A lot of people who watch a lot more of that than I do say that Herbert is a first rounder. Tagovailoa is a first rounder. He's probably going to be the first pick. Jake Fromm, to me, I've been hearing some people say, oh, he'll be somewhere around the 3rd. Yeah, watch. By the end, he'll be a first-round pick.
Yeah.
3 first-round guys that are going to be in this draft. If you have a shot at one and you're the Broncos and you might, you better know if you need to get one or not. So you better find out if Drew Lock will do it. And you know what? A good quarterback cannot entirely overcome his line, okay? But a good quarterback can do some different things. If Drew Lock looks like the guy, you will see the ability, you will see the confidence. And you know what? If he gets flustered after getting sacked a couple times and looks like garbage and does it week after week after week, then he's not your guy. And then you found out anyway. Great. That's the goal. The goal is not to go, oh, make Drew Lock your franchise guy. The true franchise guys aren't made into one. They are. They take it. You put them out there, and then you realize you can't bring them back. That can be independent of the line. So the Broncos have to find a way to get Drew Lock out there and see if he can do the job. Does he have the mentality to do the job? Yes. David Carr for the Texans all those years ago got sacked like no quarterback had before as a rookie, and it kind of broke him. And that's unfortunate because I thought David Carr had talent. But I don't think David Carr was an all-time great because he didn't fight through it. It did break him. I don't blame that on Carr. And I wouldn't blame it on Drew Lock. If Drew Lock ends up not being the guy, he's not the guy. Doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad player. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to be effective. Doesn't necessarily mean that Drew Lock won't be a backup in this league for 10 years. He very well might. But the Broncos are looking for their franchise guy. And if he is, you'll see it. But the only way you'll see it is you'll play him. And the sooner you play him, the better. Now, I'm not suggesting you put him in immediately against Cleveland. I'm suggesting you wait. Get him a couple weeks of practice. Get him ramped up. Get him used to his teammates. Give him the entire bye week to get ready for the Vikings. And then have him start the last 7 games of the year.
And the thing is, I've heard people say, well, just play him next year.
Why?
And then if it doesn't work out, you'll go get Trevor Lawrence. You're
Trevor
not going to
Lawrence
get.
is going to be the first pick in the draft that year, barring something really strange.
And what are the chances you get Trevor Lawrence?
Right. Your plan, if you want the first pick in the draft, you better do what the Dolphins do. You better trade off all your talent tank.
You might as well not even show up to the stadium.
Right. Because the only way you're
That's
going
the only way you're going to get
to
Trevor
assure
Lawrence.
it is you tank the season. It's the only way. The suck for luck, if you remember that most recently. It's the only way. Only way you get those guys. You want the Broncos to tank? You want to go 0-16? Because that's what it's going to take if you want to make sure.
That team's got to be worse than this team now.
Way worse, which means you're going to have to trade off some talent. Someone like Justin Simmons could accidentally get a pick and win you a game. Blow your chance of getting Trevor Lawrence. So you better not re-sign him or re-sign him and trade him. That's what it takes if that's the angle. You're better off with 3 first-round quarterbacks available to find out if Drew Lock can play right now. You're better off finding out if Drew Lock's mobility, which is, I don't have the math, but let me carry the one, infinitely better than Joe Flacco's, can be a little bit more effective with the line you have. Because here's the problem. Here's another military reference. You go to war with the soldiers you got. You could make the argument the Broncos should have better players, and I'm with you on that. But they don't. This is who they have, and that can't get fixed until next offseason. You're talking about trading Emmanuel Sanders. You're not talking about a trading to upgrade this year's team. This year's team gets worse. If you trade Emmanuel Sanders or Derek Wolfe or Chris Harris or even Von Miller, this year's team gets worse. In every one of those scenarios. So you have to decide, is this what you're comfortable with? You need to play Drew Lock right now to find out what he can do and what he can't. Put it the other way. What if he is? What if he steps in and he looks tremendous? What if he steps in and he looks like Carson Wentz did? You go, oh, guess what? We got a guy now. Now we can spend the 2019 offseason, 2020 offseason, the fall of start the 2020 clock and say, now we're going to acquire players that can work for Drew Lock.
Well,
that's what the Ravens did. How's that working out for them?
What offense are you going to run? That's another question.
Well, and you can find out once you actually decide who your quarterback is. You need to simplify it a bit for Drew Lock, but probably not that much. And then you need to play that for 7 weeks and see if he can make it work.
I mean, do you personally think Rich Scangarello can adjust his offense for Drew Lock or adjust to Drew Lock's offense and run some RPO college football type offense? Because if he can't, now we got another issue where we had to find another offensive coordinator.
And you can't just keep flipping these guys every year and expect it to work out.
At what point you got to marry two?
It hurts the line, which is a problem when they're trying to get new stuff every year. Regarding Rich Scangarello and Drew Lock, how they could work together, I'll give you some reasons for optimism next. Been talking about Drew Lock, when he could start. I've been suggesting, well, I haven't even been suggesting. I've been all but standing on the table and pounding at it. November 17th, week 11 against Minnesota should be Drew Lock's debut. It's the right time. It's a road game. It's following the bye. I have a couple of weeks to practice with the team. That's the right week. I don't care what the record is at that point. I didn't care what the record was when I said that they should be worrying about getting Drew Lock ready as soon as possible after week 1. I'm certainly not going to care when they're 2-5. You can win the next 2. Whatever. Don't care. Beat Indianapolis and Cleveland? That's great. Drew Lock should start against Minnesota. You're trying to build the future of this team. And the idea behind it, somehow holding it back, is that the line isn't very good. Look, you can't wait for the line to be good. When's that going to happen? You have to play him. That's it. Look at the quarterbacks who are having success. Look at the quarterbacks that have been drafted high. Look at when they play. Do they worry about guarding them for the line? I've gone over this before. Top quarterback picks play almost exclusively in their first season, and they play early. And by the way, top quarterback picks are picked because their team is garbage, right? You want to go get Kyler Murray? Your team has to be hot garbage. You have to be terrible. You have to be literally the worst team in the league. You want Tua Tagovailoa? You have to be literally the worst team in the league. Looks like the Bengals and Dolphins will settle that when they play later this year. You want to take a guess on when Tua Tagovailoa will start his first game? It'll be week 1. You won't be hearing them talk about, well, we have to wait for the just right Goldilocks offensive line to put him back there. No, you get your guy, you play your guy. The Broncos don't know if Drew Lock is their guy yet, but I can tell you, if you're going to ask me who's going to lead the Broncos to a Super Bowl in the next 5 years, is it likely to be Joe Flacco or Drew Lock? It's going to be Drew Lock, because Joe Flacco will be 39 years old. So find out what your future holds. Play Drew Lock as soon as he's ready. The questions would be, what can the Broncos do? Kevin correctly brought up, what can Rich Scangarello do? Do you trust him to change the offense for Drew Lock? Well, one, I don't even know what the offense is just yet, so I don't know how much changes necessarily are needed. But I will say that what Scangarello did with Nick Mullins last year in San Francisco, and he wasn't the offensive coordinator, he was the quarterback's coach, looks like a pretty good blueprint for what the Broncos could do with Drew Lock. It's a little bit simplified, but it allowed Mullins to do what he did well, kept him from doing the things that he didn't do well very often. Utilized the tight end, which, by the way, the Broncos should start doing, especially because after they trade Emmanuel Sanders, not entirely sure Deshaun Hamilton's ready for stardom yet. You drafted Noah Fant in the first round. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone to see if both of those guys are the guys you think they are? In Scangarello's case, maybe you don't think he can call all the plays. I know there are a lot of people here that don't have a lot of faith in him. I haven't said that I have faith in him yet, but I would say that the Broncos have performed. The Broncos offense, by the way, is atrocious. There's no question about it. But the last few games, they've scored touchdowns on their opening drives, haven't they? Those are scripted plays. Who scripted them? Rich Scangarello. So I think somewhere inside his noggin is the ability to do this. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take experience. And if the Broncos weren't willing to wait on that, why did they hire a first-time offensive coordinator? That's their fault. It's not Scangarello's fault. You hire a first-time coordinator and you expect him to be elite on day one? I hope the Broncos weren't foolish enough to think that. Think he was going to be a top 5 guy in play calling in his first season? I really hope the Broncos didn't believe that. I hope they didn't believe Vic Fangio would be one of the top 5 coaches in the league in his first year. That's pretty foolish. The Broncos made a commitment to a first-time head coach and a first-time offensive coordinator simultaneously. You have to play that out. Flipping again on either guy in the short term does nothing but set your team back. And believe me, after a little while, coaching candidates start to notice too. Oh, which 3 teams are calling me? Oh, which is the team that shuffles through coaches like kids through Kleenex? Oh, maybe I think I won't go there. Thanks. You don't think the coaches' agents pay attention to that? They do. The Broncos made the call to get a first-time head coach and a first-time offensive coordinator. You have to play out that hand. Those are the cards you kept. They sat down at the poker table. That was the pair they drew, and that was the pair they bet on. Well, you better keep betting on it then. That's the hand you decided to play. But if Scangarello and Locke and Fant and Reisner and Lindsey, all in their first couple years, and Sutton, are all working on it growing together, continuity does help. Continuity does matter. There were people who wanted to get rid of Michael Malone with the Denver Nuggets after his first year. They liked his X's and O's. They didn't like some things he did with the players. Guess what? The Nuggets said, no, we hired this guy for a reason. We knew he was coming off of a very short stint in Sacramento, but we hired this guy for a reason. That's who we wanted, so we hired him. They stuck with him. Look where the Nuggets are now. Look at his relationship with the players. The Broncos knew what they were doing when they hired a head coach and an offensive coordinator. Did they hire the wrong guys? Maybe. Maybe they did. But you played this hand. You have to finish it now. And that means the excuses to not play Drew Lock. Oh, but what would it send to the players? It means 2-5 isn't good enough. We'll make changes. What does it send to the rest of your players if you bench a guy like Joe Flacco? That a 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio isn't good enough to keep your job. Yeah, that's what it sends. We expect better at the Denver Broncos. The other guys don't get to play when they have the best players in front of them and everything isn't just right. You play because you're trying to get better. Let's go to the phones. Talk to Dave. Dave, how are you?
So I wanted to know, what do you think you're really going to learn? Because it'd just be like, Josh Rosen, I think, in Arizona. I mean, he didn't get hurt, but at the end of the year, 1 year up, that's it, done. Let's get him out. We'll get somebody else higher in the draft.
Yep.
But it's a great chance of getting him hurt, putting him behind this kind of line.
Did you think the line in Arizona was really good? Do you remember what the Broncos did to Josh Rosen?
No, but I think it was better than this one.
Do you think Josh Rosen is a superstar? He just got benched for
Definitely not, and it's not who they wanted to continue with.
Right.
But I think it's just a huge risk to have him get hurt, and then you can't trade him off of his college resume.
Quarterbacks get hurt behind good lines. I mean, Dave, I understand what you're saying, and there's certainly more risk of giving up sacks behind this line. It's not good. But other teams do it too. And guess what? Guess what the Cardinals found out? They found that Josh Rosen was not their franchise guy. And so they moved on, and they focused on getting one. And guess what? It sure looks like they got one, didn't they?
Right, they did. And so do you think that they ended up enhancing the trade value by playing him and giving him a pro resume, or do you think they would have gotten more off of his college resume?
I think they ought to worry less about trade value and worry about finding out if he's the actual franchise quarterback for you or not.
Well, we already know
if he is,
that. I mean, it was a second-round pick.
If he is, then you don't want to trade him at all. So who cares what his trade value is? And if he's not, well, then what does it matter? I get what you're saying, but I think the cautious approach to this is what keeps the Broncos stuck in the mud. I get what you're saying, Dave, and I appreciate the call. And I think it's what a lot of Broncos fans really think. They're like, oh, no, he'll get hurt. Well, he can get hurt behind good lines, too. Quarterbacks do all the time. How's Drew Brees? His line's pretty good. Whole team's pretty good. How's Carson Wentz? His line's pretty good. He missed all a couple years ago. That's how it works. Ben Roethlisberger's line's pretty good. Where's he? Oops. You can't play scared like that. You got to find out if the guy can play or not.
And another thing, what's he going to learn? Peyton Manning went 3-13 his first year.
Yep.
He flipped it around to 13-3 the next year.
It's because mentally he was the right guy.
You get the experience. You learn concepts. You learn to look at a defense.
And you learn to take your lumps. John Elway did the same thing. John Elway was not unbelievable when he started, as great as he was hyped to be and turned out to be. Play him. Play him, play him, play him. Tomorrow, we will follow the World Series. Which is exciting because I enjoy watching the World Series. I'm psyched. We have them all right here at the Fan. We'll follow those games starting tomorrow. 6:08 is the first pitch. Max Scherzer for Washington. Garrett Cole for the Astros. Watch those pitches fly. It's been fun. We'll catch you tomorrow after the World Series Game 1 for Kevin Kistner in the booth. I'm Sean Drotar. You can follow me at SDrotar if you'd like on Twitter. And we'll catch you tomorrow right here on Denver's Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3, The Fan.